Hey, practice owners, welcome back to another edition of Coming Back Stronger. I'm pretty excited to have our guest on today, Dr. Roy Shelburne of Appalachian Dental Group. Is it Appalachian or Appalachian?
It depends on where you're from.
Okay,
It
kind of
works either way.
Caribbean or Caribbean. They're both right,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
you'd
You
rather
can
be
call
there
it
anyway.
anything. Yeah, we aren't offended.
When you're there, yeah, when you're there, it's awesome. For anybody who's watching that doesn't know Roy, he has a very unique story. I'm gonna let him tell it, and has a unique perspective on documenting, coding, billing, and things that can happen if when you think, oh, Mary Jane will take care of that. Roy can share with you what happens when that's probably the wrong decision. So Roy, why don't let's do that for somebody who may not know you, which is hard to imagine, sort of your story, how you got into documentation. You have a good way of saying it: documentation, billing, coding, and kind of your story. And then we'll move into a few topics that we talked about that are pretty relevant for a practice owner right now as things change, that should probably get more attention as we evolve, and not leave somebody, in a spot where, maybe where you have some firsthand experience you can share.
Steve, thanks for the invitation. Appreciate being here. Appreciate the opportunity to be able to share my story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a dentist. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I am a business owner, and I'm a convicted felon. I went to prison for healthcare fraud, racketeering, and money laundering. I didn't have a good idea of the business area of my practice. I thought if I ever got anything that I wasn't entitled to, I could return it with any interest or penalties. The best offer I ever got to settle before going through with the action was 3 years in prison and a restitution of $300,000. I practiced in my grandfather's hardware store building in a small town in Southwest Virginia, largest town in the county. That population was about 1,800. Population of the county is about 20,000, so very small, rural. I had worked there with a smile on my face since I saw my first patient on July 24th of 1981. So I had flown to California to the American Dental Association meeting that year. It was in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the audience listening to Rudolph Giuliani give his keynote speech. It was 2 years after 9/11, so he was talking about his experience in New York. And my phone began to vibrate. My wife was calling. She was visiting my daughter, who was at Virginia Tech. She called to let me know that the FBI had come to my office. They'd battered down my back door, and they were taking all my records. Kind of a shocking turn of events. I flew home to find my practice surrounded by crime scene tape. Became the target of a healthcare fraud investigation for 3 years, was indicted 3 years and 3 days after that notification that they had battered down my back door, went to trial a year and a half later, and was found guilty on all charges. We were in a very poor part of the state, so we saw a lot of Medicaid patients. I saw a number of Medicaid patients. And the investigation, the term of the investigation was 6.5 years. They looked at 6.5 years of our submissions, and over the 6.5 years, I was paid $3.5 million. Pretty significant amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount that they found of the $3.5 million that I got that I wasn't entitled to was $17,899.57, which I thought was a pretty decent error percentage.
Mm-hmm.
Not to the government. And although I didn't do any of the billing, I was held responsible for. And even though we were able to go back over that 6.5 year period and do an assessment and audit of our submissions, and we found work that we had done, should have billed for, and could have billed for in excess of that amount, but it made no difference.
Right.
It was a jury trial. The jury made the determination. They never knew the amount. So when I speak, I'll usually ask the people in attendance, of the $6.5 million, how much do you think I got that I wasn't entitled to? And it's usually, a couple of $100,000. And when I say it's $17,899.57, people kind of gasp and go, "You've got to be kidding me! You went to prison for 24 months, $17,000." And the thing I didn't understand was the legal definition of intent. I thought you intended to defraud if you billed for a service you never did on a patient you never saw. You just didn't do it at all. and it certainly that is fraud, but it also, in the legal standpoint, is broader. The definition of intent to defraud is broader. It includes what they call blind disregard, which means you're doing the same thing the same way and don't have systems to identify and correct your errors. That is blind disregard and intent to defraud. So I didn't have any system to audit, to review, to identify errors and correct them. And from a legal standpoint, that is intent to defraud. So there's no such thing as an innocent mistake. So I learned all that in the process. I learned about billing and coding to make sure what I'd done and to make sure that what they were saying I had done was actually true. Documentation as well, because I think documentation also, it supports you from a legal standpoint. It justifies what you did, but it also helps to increase the legitimate reimbursement, which I'm all about that. So I focused on documentation, billing, and coding. And, you know, I went through the whole process, lost my license as a result of the conviction, was able to get it back. In Virginia, the minimum period of revocation is 3 years. I was able to get it back after the 3 years. And I practiced a bit. Dentistry is something I love. I love chairside. I love with my patients, but I'm more passionate about making sure that I'm the last dental professional who goes to prison for ignorance. I'm not proud of what happened. It's actually pretty shameful, but by sharing my story, I hope I am able to make other people aware that there are dangers and to give the tools they need to make sure they don't end up in the same soup that I was in. So that's the short Reader's Digest condensed version of what went on. And like I said, when I'm speaking, I go into it a little bit deeper to make sure that people do understand the risk.
And it's a thing, you know, you and I have talked about this before. If you go to business school, like I did, Indiana University Business School, you know, as a freshman, your first business class, you know, they'll talk about corporations, protections, boundaries, all the duties, all these things that you know, nobody talks about in dental school. Right. And I think part of the nature of a dentist practice owner is you have this clinical dental education, and that's what you're there to do. Right. Somebody else takes care of all the other stuff. It's just how it works. You hire that person, they take care of it. But at the end of the day, I think you have told me before, even the person who was doing the billing said, listen, I'm the one who did this. Doctor didn't even know what we were doing. And you had all this stuff out on the table. And at the end of the day, it doesn't absolve you of responsibility or liability. You as the owner, you know, in a day and age, it's always interesting to me, Roy, when people say corporate dentistry. And I say, well, I got bad news for you. You should be corporate dentistry. You should be a corporation and keep those boundaries. And those things are there for a reason. And this is one of them. Now, it can be backwards on you. And it turns out no matter what your staff does, it comes back to you. You are the owner. If you're the owner, it comes back to you. So that's why I thought it was relevant today to talk about that.
Yeah, your signature is on that claim form, and that claim form is a legal document. So they have been given your permission to affix your signature on that claim form, signifying that it is true in all its components. But it's a legal document. Yeah. So regardless of who fills it out, it could be the doctor themselves, which is almost never, right, or a team member, which is more common. It's the doctor's ultimate responsibility to make sure that things are right, and they bear the responsibility.
Even a stamp. And I think that, I'm assuming you probably used, or they used a stamp, or, you know, which you think is convenient and easy. And at some point in your, you know, when you come out of dental school and you start running your business, you got this stack of forms. And at the end of every week or month or day or whatever you sign them, you say, I've got a great idea. Let me get a stamp. And, you know, again, one of the first things that you'll learn in business school is don't do that. You know, unless you have a lot of safeguards in place, because that is if you've intended that to be your legal signature, it's your legal signature wherever that person stamps it.
Absolutely.
You know? So it could be a check, it could be an insurance claim, it could be, you know, so that's
opening up a line of credit or applying for a credit card or any of those things. So yeah.
And those, you know, it's interesting because you know, I have this ongoing conversation with, you know, you and I spoke a lot, travel a lot. We'll get back to it, used to. And I have this ongoing conversation that always comes back to how many sole practitioners have been stolen from by a very trusted member of their team. And, I'll have people say, oh, it's 70, 75%. I'm about the 90 to 95% range in some form or fashion. And it doesn't mean that they're a bad person. It just means that a situation exists where, you've got a stamp, you're doing ABC, but I can tell you this with absolute certainty. 100% of the practices I ever worked with, in the years past in coaching and consulting, 100% we found anything ranging from, a few $1,000s up to hundreds of thousands of dollars. And the reason I say that is the same sort of situation. I think they don't teach you anything like this in dental school. They don't teach you those boundaries of how to prevent this. You just want to go do the dentistry, which you were trained to do. But now you have all these legal things that come along with being the owner of the business. And so, a guy like you is, if anything, maybe the message is here's what not to do. And here's what to be conscious of and aware of. And I think a lot of docs listen right now will say, well, that's impossible. That can't be. And I
was that guy. I was that guy. I like I said, I believed if I got anything I wasn't entitled to, I'd be given the ability to give it back and any interest or penalties that were associated. And I had no idea. And if somebody actually told me that this could happen to somebody, I would have gone, nah, that just doesn't happen.
Oh, in New York City or somewhere like that, where some guy's in a seedy little practice and he's, got a little Medicaid churn, and it's not. It's, it's regular docs. And what were you, 20? You've been practicing 20 years?
Actually, 81 now would be 39.
Yeah. So when when all this happened was 2000, was it one?
2003 was the search and seizure. 2006 was the arrest. 2008 was the trial. Was released in 2010, off probation 2014.
That is just that's a gigantic part of your life to get beaten up over, clerical issues.
It took a chunk.
I bet. Well, and so I always appreciate you sharing that. It's an amazing story, and it really is a sort of a cautionary tale for an owner who just wants to be the dentist and kind of doing that. So I thought this would be a good thing. We had talked a couple of topics that you are, I think, very well. You're the guy to talk to about. One is PPOs and what a doc right now might be doing, and some new metrics, and then telemedicine, which is a hot item, and that's kind of how we got in the conversation. Is you have a unique perspective on the legal limits and boundaries and definitions, which we'll kind of end with, but because I think it's very significant to transition into that. So we'll kind of put I learned some things in a 2-minute conversation with you at the beginning that, would have never occurred to me, but is right on. So again, ways to keep you out of jail.
Yeah.
So PPOs, you were sharing with me about some sort of the metrics of PPOs. And if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing with viewers right now, coming back, reopening the way they should look at their PPOs or not.
So PPOs by nature, there are a lot of restrictions, a lot of limitations, and generally when practitioners look at a contract, the only thing they look at is the fee schedule, and you determine, well, whether or not I can make this work. And prior to this, you had a pretty decent idea of what you can generate, the number of patients you could see, your production levels. We're in a whole brave new world, so that as far as the capacity in most practices that I've spoken with, that capacity has been greatly reduced because of the amount of time it takes to turn the room around or change your PPE, or you're not having multiple people in the waiting room at the same time. So you can't have somebody just pull up and go, hey, I'm having a toothache. Can you see me? We'll just sit down and wait for a few minutes and we'll see if we can. They're outside in the car waiting to be texted now. And as far as having multitudes of practice, no. So that is going to constrict the amount of time that your practice is going to be able to spend in actual care of your patients. And The premise of a PPO is that, number one, they're going to send you more patients because you're in network. That's one of the big selling points. And if you look at it, can that happen? It can. But in today's environment, you need to think about, okay, so my office overhead is 70%, so my profit is 30%.
Mm-hmm.
And I've signed up for this new PPO, which requires me to reduce my fee schedule by 15%. So you've cut your profitability in half. You went from 30% down to 15% because of the 30%, you gave half of that 15% away for the ability to be able to see all these new patients that the PPO is going to send you, which means to make the same amount of money, you're going to have to see twice as many patients because you have half your profitability.
Mm-hmm.
So in today's world, can you afford that? You're seeing fewer patients, so your ability to be able to produce more by seeing a greater volume, that has been greatly restricted. So it's time to look at your metrics again, look at your fee schedule, look at how much you're having to write off for this PPO and what your overhead is to find out if it's going to work. And you may find that you're actually losing money when you spend that time to see that patient, a PPO patient, as opposed to a fee-for-service patient, or for a patient that they have insurance and you're not in network with. So it's a very, very important time that you do those metrics again, because things moving forward are going to be very much different. You could have kind of figured it out in the past because things were kind of perking along at a similar rate. You had an idea of your capacity and how many you could see. But from this point, once we are back in what's ever considered the new normal, trying to figure out, okay, now what is our capacity? What is our overhead now? A lot of people are toying with the idea of charging for the PPO fee. Some insurance companies have stepped up and said, okay, I'm going to give you $10 per patient visit, or $8 per patient visit, or one in Tennessee said, I'm going to give you $1,000 to use at Henry Schein. I'm going to give you a grant to be able to buy PPE. It's all over the board now. So you have to kind of weigh the additional expenses and the capacity you have for your new patients, and look at your PPOs and the write-offs you're having to take and figure out, can I make this work? Is it something that I want to make work? Do I want to work harder when, in fact, if we did go out of network with this PPO, that means our capacity for fee-for-service patients would increase. And, I think there's a pent-up need, and, there's a lot of different ideas out there about whether there is or not, whether patients are going to come in or not. But there again, we don't know. We don't know. Are we going to have new patients? Or are we going to have fee-for-service patients that are coming? Or is it only going to be PPO patients? You don't know. But what I'm saying is you need to review those numbers, know where you stand, know what you're going to be looking at going forward, and figure out how that plugs into your overhead and the reimbursement from those plans that you decided you're going to reduce your fees for.
Mm-hmm. So I had, you're spot on. I have this conversation many, many, many times over the course of a year and over a course of years. And, I'm not opposed to PPOs. There are people who hate them or love them. I'm opposed to losing money is what I always say. I'm not opposed to PPOs. I'm opposed to losing money. So right. And the way that it's described is, if I have I usually have a slide in the math, and I'll say, listen, if you're going to write off 30% to get new patients, which is kind of the reason that you're doing it.
Right.
So that marketing just became one of your biggest expenses. In fact, on average, it just became a bigger expense than payroll or taxes, which used to be your two biggest expense. Now It's marketing, because you're writing off 30 cents on the dollar. I think a lot of practice owners, Dr. Roy, you went to dental school. I went to business school. And that's how, so you look at the clinical side and say, oh, somebody will figure out the insurance side and just assume that these are nice people. It's easy to file claims. And but at the end of the day, your office manager, they probably understand less about it than you do. So what I would always say is, the average marketing expense is 5 to 6%. So if I have $1 million practice, that's $50,000 a year. That's $4,500 a month. how many new patients could you get for $4,500 a month if you went to an agency and said, hey, get me some fee-for-service patients?
Absolutely.
Because the difference now becomes, and here's another thing you said that I always like to clarify, and I always, it's funny because I always, you know, I'll talk to a room full of dentists and I can see them writing it down and taking notes, and I'm thinking, I don't even know what you're writing down. You just said a 70% cost, a 30% profit margin. And I always feel I need to repeat this because I think a lot of times that doesn't sink in. What it means is you're paying 70 cents of every single dollar on average. Now, you can't sit down and say, all right, this dollar, you know, I used to pay the rent with, and this dollar I didn't pay anything with, so I get to keep this whole dollar. On average, 70 cents out of every dollar went to pay heat, light, rent, people, taxes, you, all the junk that goes into your business, and you got to keep 30 for you to take, you know, to use to build the business or do whatever you want to do, or just take it home and buy a, you know, a bigger boat, or take another cruise. So you get to use it for what you want. And every time you take a bite out of that by reducing your fee schedule or some new expense, is money you don't have left. And when you get into that, so the point of that is if marketing, say, is 5% for your $1 million practice, and docs say, I can't spend 50 grand on marketing, you just spent $300,000 to take this PPO. And so I think that's significant. And at a time when margins are already tight, there are a lot of docs that taking a PPO they're losing money. If they're busy and full and they're writing off 30% and they're working on a 15 or 20% margin because of new costs, lower production, you know, this comes back to bite you at the end of the year, and you can't understand why you can't make payroll.
Yeah, that's way too late to figure that out. That's way too late to figure that out. This is an ongoing new normal, and even though you were on automatic pilot to some extent prior to this, you can't do that now.
Yeah,
you've got to. It's a new normal. The whole thing has changed. The amount you're generating, the amount of overhead that you're having to pay for, all the additional equipment or PPE or whatever that might be. Mm-hmm. You know, it's a whole new world. And if you don't have the new numbers and watch them very closely moving forward, they can get away from you before you.
Well, and going to the bank to borrow money when you're losing money, you know, what do they say? Banks love loaning you money when you don't need it. When you need it and you've come out of this, and you know you need a couple $100 grand to get back on your feet, and you've got a hole that's $300 grand deep, very few banks are gonna, you know, very few
throw more money at you. No, when you're in a hole, stop digging. Isn't that the old adage?
Yeah, that's it. First thing to do, stop digging.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're in a hole and not able to make it, and they're throwing money at you, they're burying you. Is basically what they're doing. They might as well be throwing dirt on your body.
They're going to become the new owners of your house or whatever, securing that loan. And I have watched a lot of practice owners that I know and have worked with that really, you know, they got themselves into the mess to begin with, just by not paying attention to margins. Sure. And then, you know, they didn't realize when they needed money to bail out of that, first of the year, they were in trouble, and the bank said, yeah, we'll loan it. Well, they loaned it on that house they've been living in for 20 years. And guess what? When they come to collect their money, that's your security. So you're downsizing whether you like it or not. So the key is to help docs stay out of that. I did want to ask you about, I know you work with Dr. Charles Blair, and probably anybody who's listening or viewing, if you don't know Charles Blair, he's a guy to know. I told you before we started that, you know, I love what he does. I love the book. Practices that I would go into and coach and consult in years past. I had a little checklist, and there were like 6 things on it. And one of the number one, I think it was number 2 or 3, was buy Charles Blair's book, spend $98. And, you know, this isn't a pitch for Charles's book. It's just, it's $98. You make it back in 5 seconds, your first billing. And so maybe that I'd like you to, I mean, again, this isn't about Charles Blair, the book, but it's really about the idea to maximize your reimbursement. And he has a really good methodology, been proven over years and years and years. Could be a narrative. It could be a way, you know, when I was down deep in it, it would say, you know, this insurance company bills this way with these codes, and this one. I mean, so your insurance billing person can literally mine thousands of dollars a month out of that thing just by the way they bill something you're already doing.
Correct.
So that's a way to maximize. You had used a term, revenue enhancement, coding it for revenue enhancement, and that's kind of what he does. So if you could spend a minute and sort of share with somebody who doesn't know how it's, you know, PPO or the reimbursement isn't locked in stone. It's, you can bring that up a little bit by, you know, by the way you code, right?
Oh yeah, by the way you code, you use the most accurate code to describe the service that you provided, but there again, there are what I call magic words that the insurance company looks for. For example, most insurance plans disallow any reimbursement for teeth that are damaged as a result of attrition or parafunctional habits. That's something they won't pay for. So I've seen a lot of practices send claims for teeth that were worn horribly. Do they need to be restored? They absolutely do, but because of that restriction on the plan, it will not pay for it because of the attrition or erosion or one of those excluded things. However, if the tooth is also fractured, it will pay for the reconstruction as a result of the fracture. So when you send the claim, focus on the fact that the tooth was fractured and ignore the other, because the insurance company is going to disallow based on the wear. They will pay for it based on the fracture. And for example, cracked teeth. Insurance companies will look at cracks and go, this tooth, I see the crack, but that's asymptomatic. All teeth are cracked. You need to let the insurance company know if there is pain associated with it. So if you bite on it, if it's hot or cold, if it hurts when you release it, because there's pain associated with that tooth, it would pay for the crown based on the patient's discomfort. It will not pay for it based on the fact that it's only cracked. They say, it's a crack? Sure, there's a crack there. Lots of teeth are cracked. We don't need to do anything with cracked teeth. So there again, it's a matter of understanding from the insurance company's perspective, actually go to the insurance company's meetings. Actually, there's a AADC, the American Association of Dental Consultants. Those are consultants who work for the insurance company and review our claims. I go to those meetings. Actually, I was to be one of their speakers this year. But you get behind the curtain and you see from the insurance perspective what how they look at claims, what they look for justification and for adjudication. And it's good to know what they think and what they talk about and areas they think that we're abusing. Core buildups. The magic word for core buildup is retention. Without the core buildup, the tooth would not be able to retain the tooth or retain the crown. So the magic word is retention. You don't focus on the fact that there's, a lot of tooth that is broken or decayed. They can see that in an x-ray or a photo. They want to know, after you do this, is there enough furrow there to be able to get the retention and resistance form to be able to keep the tooth? If you communicate that, it'll get paid for. So it's all a matter of understanding from the perspective of the insurance company the words that they need to see to correct it. And let's face it, a lot of insurance teams will call for follow-up on insurance claims in today's world, and the person they talk to now, their primary language is not English. They don't understand English a whole lot. So they're given a list of those magic words, and if the claim has that information outlined, then it's okay, check mark, we pay for this one. So it's just a matter of knowing the ins and outs, and those books are great at being able to do that. Love working with Dr. Blair, love being able to edit and to write for him. Is a brilliant guy. I tell people I want to know half as much as he's forgotten in his lifetime. Brilliant man.
He has worked and spoken with us for 30 years. And at a time when, insurance was new, or dental insurance was new. So he's kind of incrementally grown into this over the years. And yeah, he knows, that's a great way to put it, magic words. And I always say, in fact, Roy, back 8 weeks ago, we were having conversations like this about shutting down and what should a practice owner do. And one of the things was go in and just mind your AR, mind your accounts receivable. And, don't call patients. You know why they're not paying you. They're not working. But, Delta Dental's working. Their claims processors are working right now.
Worked with a couple of offices, and their AR went from $110,000 to $30,000.
Yeah, I had a guy call me or emailed me the week after, because basically the gist of the conversation was go in, look at your AR, anything over 30 days, you need, with an insurance company, you need to start working on. He called,
Yeah,
he sent an email, he had $451,000. He had never looked at it, had no idea.
we had instructed all the practices, all the ones that I consult with, to go back over the last 6 months, look at every denied service, look at every denied claim. And 42% of those, they were able to resubmit with supporting information or appeal and get them paid.
Right.
It just goes to show you is it challenging to do that? And I understand we don't have a whole lot of extra time in our dental practices, but is it worthwhile to look at every single denial and go, I wonder why this is denied, and I wonder if there's something we can do to get this paid? And it's a matter of learning the ins and outs and those magic words. You may not have had a magic word on there when you sent it in. Be able to leave nothing on the table. I'm all about maximizing legitimate, the key word is legitimate reimbursement that they do, reduce the risk, because there are risks involved in submitting claims willy-nilly and not doing it appropriately. And I want to keep people out of prison ultimately. I want to be the best dental professional who goes to prison. So those are my goals, and are there ways to be able to do that? You know, I as a speaker, there are a lot of speakers who say, I don't want to scare you. I'm not that guy. I want to terrify you, but I also want to give you the tools necessary to make sure that you leave nothing on the table. I want you to be very aggressive, but aggressive in a way that is proven to be appropriate, not doing anything kind of crazy. I get people ask from time to time, how do we get around that? You signed the PPO contract and it says you can't do that. How do we get around that? I'm sorry, the signature on that contract indicated that you can't get around that. There's no way to do that. You've agreed to that limitation, and they're like, really? Unfortunately.
I think they don't realize you can negotiate that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And you can scratch things out of the contract. Say, listen, here's what I'm not willing to do, and either, go work with it or don't.
Yeah. And another thing that people aren't aware of, in today's world, multiple insurances are kind of linked together, kind of like a network. So if you become in network with one, it also makes you in network with this whole group of other ones. Most people don't realize if you have signed a contract with each of the 6 individual plans in that group, you get paid. They compare all the fee schedules, and you get paid on the lowest fee schedule. So even the insurance carriers who have the higher fee schedule can now pay you at the lower fee schedule, because you have contracted directly with that carrier in that network that has the lowest fee schedule. What they don't know is you can go out of direct participation with all 5 of the lower of the 6, only enroll with the highest of the 6, and the other 6 are obligated to pay at the higher fee schedule. So if you do a little bit of due diligence and figure out in that network, and like I said, there are a lot of plans now. If you're in plan A, it makes you also in plan B, C, D, and E.
Right.
But if you're also in plan B, C, D, and E on your own, you've signed up with them independently. So you have participation agreements, contracts signed with all of those. They pay you on the lowest. They all compare and go, what's your fee schedule? What's your fee schedule? Well, this guy is in all 6 of us. We're going to pay him at this lowest fee. However, if you only enroll in the highest, all the 6 are obligated to pay at the higher rate. A lot of people don't know that. So there's a way to be able to do that as well.
Do you cover that in with what you do with Dr. Blair?
Yeah, that's we do articles periodically. I did an article in the insurance newsletter, which is one of his publications, that talked about just that, how you go about negotiating and how you go in and out of the plans that will maximize your reimbursement. Do it smart.
Well, and I know the concept of the magic words. What I always say is, you're not, when you file a claim, you're not filing it with a dentist. So this awesome explanation you just gave, this narrative, it could probably be 3 paragraphs less and include 6 magic words, and the processor who just wants to say who is up or down. That's it.
Right.
Got it, doesn't got it, and kick it off. And you can appeal it, but now that's back on you. So that's more time. So if you're already writing off 30%, now you're going to invest more time. So so the PPO thing right now is a good time to back up evaluate those plans before you go forward with an eye towards profitability through the end of the year, because you need it. This can be critical. So I wanted to kind of make a transition here. We talked beforehand, and you have a very interesting perspective on a hot topic for today, or this day, I guess, telemedicine, or excuse me, teledental or telemed. And the reason I say this is my wife works for a very large health insurance company, Fortune 100 company, and she does plan design, and you know, we've had these conversations for the past year or so. Telemedicine, telepsych, whatever. They're trying to find ways to be more efficient and bill. And teledental has become a very big thing right now in concept. It's still way up here. It's still, you know, it's still a little the Wild West, and we're figuring it out. But Roy, you had a sort of a perspective on this that literally in 1,000 conversations I've never heard of or never thought about. And if you would, I'd like you to share that as it relates to with coding. And, you know, we talked about a lot of PPO stuff, you know, that's going to become a part of it, but it needs to become a part of it in the right way. So would you mind sort of sharing that, or spend a few minutes on the potholes or the potential potholes?
Yeah, I'm happy to. You know, telemedicine, teledentistry, is it coming? Certainly is. I actually have a daughter who is an audiologist, works with the VA in North Carolina, and she is their telemedicine representative for audiology. So this is a topic near and dear to home. And do we in dentistry need to initiate a kind of way to converse with patients, especially in today's world, and do it virtually? Absolutely. And in fact, the ADA, the American Dental Association, has been proactive. They reached out to the insurance carriers and asked them, you know, can a dentist bill for an evaluation, a limited oral evaluation of 140, done via teledentistry? And the insurance companies, all but one, there were 26 that said yes, one said no, asked could they bill for teledentistry. Bill for teledentistry, yes. Would they pay for it? No. So the 9995, the 9996, asynchronous or synchronous teledentistry, you can bill for it. They're not going to pay it, but they were asked, would they pay for the evaluation? And all but one of the insurance carriers said yes. Although that is not the green light. We were talking about things that you need to be aware of. Most state dental practice acts do not allow dentists to conduct evaluations virtually. So even though the insurance company says, yes, you can do it and we're going to pay for it, your Dental Practice Act says, a dentist cannot do an evaluation virtually via telemedicine, teledentistry, however you want to do that. I know in Virginia you cannot. You have to be in the presence of the patient. So what do you code that as? So it would be a 190 or 191, which is a screening or an assessment. That's not going to be paid, but it's one way to be able to track that. You also need to understand that there are malpractice concerns. Any advice that you give that patient over the telephone, you're as responsible for as if the patient were in your chair and in your practice. So in order to conduct that interview with a patient, you would need to do that with the same amount of support you would with a patient in your practice. So we're talking about informed consents need to be signed. You need to have a health history that you review. Just because you're doing it via television or whatever that might be, it does not reduce the requirement that you need to meet standard of care. So there again, documentation of that event with your patient, it needs to be documented appropriately, and things that you don't even think about. For example, if you're talking to a patient who is in Kentucky and you're in Virginia, I live in the western part of Virginia, so Kentucky is 5 miles this way, Tennessee is 4 miles this way, so do we get patients from both? Yes. If you are talking to that patient who is in Kentucky, from a legal standpoint, you need to have a Kentucky license to be able to give information to that patient in Kentucky, or a Tennessee license if you're talking to that patient in Tennessee. We don't even think about that. It's kind of like, oh, really? You need to be aware that the HIPAA requirements have been reduced. Now, that's not going to be moving forward. So why would you set up a program now that might be compliant because it's been reduced as far as the requirements go, just go ahead. If you're going to do it appropriately. And doxy.me, doxy.me is a platform, it's free, that meets all the requirements. Medicine's used it for years, so I would encourage you, if you're going to do that, and I do very much encourage offices to start using teleconferencing with your patients. Do it in a platform that does meet the requirement. And the reason why I do that, do suggest that, is because in today's world, are we going to have the luxury of having multiple patients in the waiting room, filling out information or giving, feedback? You're not. You can't have a whole lot of people bunched in there. So you can clear all that prior to the patient coming into the practice. So I would use that platform to do a health history review. I would do it to, set them up for an expectation. If a patient's not been in the practice or in a dentist for 7 years, and they call and they say, I just want a cleaning, have the hygienist go back with that patient and do a little bit of an assessment prior to, and go, in most cases, patients with what I'm seeing in your mouth and the history you're giving me, that probably would be inappropriate for us to treat you with a cleaning. More than likely, that would be a scaling and root plane. And you can set that up prior to the patient coming in, so that's streamlined. I encourage you to get the informed consent signed prior to and explain. The informed consent, the patient has to have an opportunity to ask you questions back and forth. Can you do that virtually? That's probably not going to be able to meet the standard of care, but if you do it virtually, have the patient read it, review it, and be able to answer questions prior to, can that be done? Yes. So like I said, I would use telemedicine, teledentistry, not to be able to bill out an evaluation, because in most states you can't, but in a way to streamline that visit. So when the patient is ready to come into practice, you've got everything you need. You've had that discussion with the patient. The informed consent is over. Patient goes directly from that front door into the treatment room, and there's no lag time. There's no delay, and you don't have a whole lot of people congregating at the front desk. So is this a way to be able to make that so it does appropriately? Yes. So understand, though, the standard of care is exactly the same for a time with a patient, whether it was virtually or whether it is face-to-face. So you need to meet those requirements as well. You need to ask, I would ask your malpractice carrier, again, another pothole. Will my malpractice cover me if I am conducting telemedicine? And some insurance companies, especially in dentistry, it's a brave new world. It's not something that's been done. It may not be covered on your malpractice policy. So there again, you need to clear that as well. So are there potholes? There are. Should you do it? I absolutely think you should.
Yeah. I think and maybe you're the one unique guy in dentistry who, has that perspective of how, it's not a bad thing to do, but it's a bad thing to do the wrong way. So hire somebody. And there's a question. Do you have any, any platforms that, are developing? I'm a big believer in platforms because, again, back to our original beginning of the conversation, there are liabilities I assume, and there are liabilities I can hand off to a contractor who sets them. There are in the business world, there are warranties, so to speak, and it doesn't mean if it breaks, you fix it. It means that you're setting yourself up as an expert. Right. So you have expressed, now if you're cutting my grass and you fix my plumbing and the plumbing fails, you're not I shouldn't have expected you to be an expert plumber. However, if I hire the plumber and the building floods and everything gets destroyed, they've set themselves up as an expert. And I have a way to say, what you didn't with your Medicare or Medicaid billing is, hey, I pay these people. That's their job. So the same thing can kind of apply with teledentistry. That's the job of the platform, not your job. So if you're going to try and do teledentistry with, FaceTime, all rules are off. There's nobody to hand it off and say, Apple, I did it over FaceTime, so Apple's responsible. Apple doesn't do teledentistry.
Well, they do in today's environment. Actually, they have reduced the requirement, the HIPAA requirements, where you actually do FaceTime. It doesn't meet the HIPAA requirements. So later on, it will not. But in today's world, will it violate HIPAA? Yes. what they've said, we're just not going to act on your violation.
Is that through the end of the year? Do you know, through the end of 2020?
I don't think they've set a date.
Okay.
They're going to draw the line at the sand at some point and go, okay, you have to meet the requirements now moving forward. We're going to go ahead and bring the HIPAA monster back into play.
Right. And I knew it was a temporary pause just for like telemedicine. You can go into a nursing, as a physician, you can go into a nursing home without going into the nursing home.
Physicians can actually conduct evaluations and they can do exams virtually. And that's something that medicine's recognized for a number of years. If you want to see what's going to happen in dentistry, look at medicine 10 years ago. Yeah. We were catapulted forward because of the pandemic. We've moved a little bit further, but like I said, that's something that they've done. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You just implement what medicine has done. Is there a way of being able to do that? There absolutely is.
And the type of things that you do. I've actually had a telemed visit. And it was, I've told this story before, Roy. I've got a call. It was April, and cholesterol medicine that every year I make a call, or every year I have an appointment, and I guess I have to go in once a year. He has to see me. We have to have a 3-minute conversation. He has to ask me 6 questions. And, I got a call the day before my appointment, and I thought, oh, great, we're shutting down the world. This is back when, NBA finals are canceled, Major League Baseball is canceled, this is canceled. And I thought, all right, I'm going to get my doctor's appointment canceled. And so I answered it, expecting that. And she said, you have an appointment tomorrow at 11. Would you like to do it via, I forget how they said it, but would you like to do it over the video? And I said, well, sure. And she said, okay. She said, watch for a text and just click that text at your appointment time, and we'll have your appointment. Yep. So I got a text, and it installed. I just saw it yesterday. I was telling you earlier about my bad eyes. It is, oh gosh, I can't see the app. Yeah. It's a little bitty app that installs.
When you sign on, you're going to be in a virtual waiting room as well.
Yes, that's what I did.
Yeah.
So he popped on, and he said, hey, how's Paula? How's this, that? We had a conversation. He goes, okay, has anything changed? Okay, check. And he said, do you want me to have this sent to your house from now on? And I said, well, sure. And he checked a box. The next day, my prescription showed up in the mailbox.
Yep. And
so I called him back, and I said, this is really cool. How long have you guys been doing this? And he goes, I'll be honest with you, I started yesterday. And he said for 5 years, they've tried to roll it into our practice. He's in a big group practice. Yeah. And he said, and he's my age, he's an old guy. And he fought it and fought it and fought it. And he said, yesterday we started doing them. And he said, I realized he said, after this, I'm going to carve out a morning every week and just do these 3-minute annual prescription visits. He said, I've seen like 25 people in the morning. And I said, well, Doc, let me tell you from my end of it. I didn't have to get in the car, drive 30 minutes to your office, park, walk up, pay for parking, sit in a waiting room full of people for, half hour, 45 minutes to have a 3-minute chat with you, and then reverse that to come back to work.
Right.
I saved 3 hours of my valuable day working. Took 3 minutes, did our thing, and exactly the same outcome. And apparently he's able to bill that exactly like if I was there.
Absolutely.
Which is in medicine. We don't have that yet. But so that's sort of my question. That's a thing. Now, he can't do everything, but he can do that one thing very efficiently.
Right.
Part of it, he block scheduled it, I guess, for Wednesday mornings or prescription renewals or whatever that you call it.
Right.
I think that's how dentistry does this. I mean, do you think? We don't even know what it's going to be, but there's got to be things that
dentistry will be. There are things that we can do in dentistry via video that you don't have to be in face to face. And most states are now scrambling to modify their dental practice acts, so that dentists are going to have a wider array of things that can be done. I've got a feeling that we can do a few limited evaluations depending on what the issue is. If it's something that standard of care would need to be met by seeing the patient, then
Right.
certainly there's a limitation there, but they're going to give some leeway to the dentist. If it's something that you can be able to diagnose and make recommendations to that patient virtually, I think they'll allow you to do that. I think most dental practice acts are going to be expanded.
Yeah.
And the pandemic will cause that, and it's going to move much faster than it would have ever happened before. So keep an eye to the ground or an ear to the ground and listen to, state associations are going to fire off a lot of information about new legislature. They'll keep you informed. So in today's world, don't delete any of those. Make sure that you read what they've sent you. In years past, it was mostly propaganda. In today's world, there are some really helpful things that are being conveyed via email from associations and groups. So it's a good time to pay attention to those.
Yeah, I think I agree. This is not a genie we can get back in that bottle, and not because of the virus, but just because, like my telemed visit. I mean, think of the hours I've wasted in, I don't know, 10 years, just to have a visit that was 3 minutes long. Right. And, to go sit in a reception room with sick people.
Exactly.
So I don't think it's that. I think it's just a smart workflow solution. But so I guess back to the point about contractors, though, what I might suggest, I'll get your thoughts on it. And if you have any, appreciate you sharing those. But rather than you trying to figure it out yourself, I'm a big believer in, especially when there are liabilities and risks and duties or legal things you learned about the hard way. Right. Let somebody who this is all they do, let them carry that for a while until it shakes out. Right. It might be, a monthly fee instead of nothing. But it's a monthly fee that's buying you, a phone number and somebody to pass off and say, hey, the rules got broken. Talk to these guys.
Right.
So you got anybody that's doing it? I don't want to say legitimately, but anybody that's sort of ahead of the pack on the legal piece of it that
in dentistry?
Yeah.
No, I do workshops. I don't go and set up directly. And I imagine if somebody wanted me to, I could. And as far as taking responsibility, certainly you'd have to have an attorney review that, but there's a possibility to be able to do that. My caveat would be, in today's world, it's going to change so rapidly that it's, what's correct today may not be correct tomorrow. And there again, it's another one of those things I would not suggest that a practice do it on their own, because there are so many potholes and minefields you need to be aware of. You need to defer that to somebody who specializes in that support. Can I do that? Do I do workshops? Yes, I've done both those. And in terms of anybody that will come in and set that up on site, I don't know of anybody.
Okay. Maybe that'll be a good follow-up for us. Just an article or something in the magazine, or just interviews. It's a hot topic, hot conversation. My gut is somebody will emerge as the leader over the next year or two. And it's probably worth paying them to take that on. But also, I think it's good just to keep your, as you say, keep your ear to the ground and figure out, what's working for some people. Right. There are docs, there are people, we'll put it this way. There are people who like to be the first one out there doing it. And then there are people, they call them early adopters in business. So they're the early adopters. When when the iPhone comes out, they want to have the first one. And, they fight it.
You're the dentist, you can go and open a closet and there is $200,000 worth of technology that never got used.
Right. There's tons of toys. I'm the guy, Roy, that likes to say, you know what, let them work out the bugs. Let them be frustrated. And it's awesome to have the toys, but I want it when it's smoothed out and it works and I can count on it and rely on it. But both ways work. But right now with tele-dentistry, somebody's going to be out front, figuring it out.
The platform and making sure it all works with the protocols. Obviously, there needs to be informed consent. There needs to be a review of the State Dental Practice Act. All that needs to be done prior to, and especially if you're trying to get things back up, trying to find the PPE, you need to be able to see patients. Certainly, that's not time you want to spend setting up something else when you're you're working to be able to figure out, okay, how are we going to turn these masks around so that how many times can we sterilize them before we have to throw them away?
Well, and you know, you said something really, right on. State lines.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in Louisville, Kentucky, air quotes. Technically, I live in Indiana.
Okay.
Third of Louisville is actually technically in Indiana. A river runs through the middle of Louisville, and one side's Louisville, or Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if I'm a dentist in this side of town, you know, if I'm a dentist in the Missouri side, I don't really care about Kansas. My patients come to me, you know. Well, now you're right. I'm going to them. So that suddenly becomes, or you've got 3 states within 5 miles probably, which is suddenly a thing that was never an issue before. Now it is. So
the practice didn't move. Now the practice moves. You're actually,
yes.
the practice is in their living room, wherever they're at.
So yeah, that's something I had really not considered. So anything, all good stuff. I think a lot of viewers or listeners right now have about 3 pages of notes. I do. You know, I've got all my. I'm a note taker, so I have to.
Well, nobody's more surprised about what I say than I am. So
So anything else we haven't covered that is, again, you're the guy. You're sort of the boundaries guy. You know, you bending it's okay, breaking it is not. And in dentistry, I think the significant thing is you don't even know you're a good person.
well,
You think you're doing it
my
right.
wife did not think that, but hey, when everybody else is down, I do want to leave people with one thing, and it's not anything but encouragement. I lost everything. Lost my license to practice dentistry. I lost my business. They confiscated everything I owned. I lost all that. So I know what it's like to start at ground zero. But I want to encourage you. If I was able to go to that point and be able to get my license back and be able to be recognized as an American Dental Association subject matter expert in these areas, and to be able to travel around the country, and Steve, to share my information on platforms like this, I can tell you there's no pandemic, there's no recession that will keep you from moving forward. You will succeed. You will come out of this. You will be stronger. You will be better. You'll be better focused. You'll be better equipped to take better care of your patients, to look after your team, and to make dentistry the amazing profession that it always has and will always continue to be. So don't feel like you're beaten down. Don't feel like you're beaten. I've been there. I've done that. And the more time you spend there, the less time you're going to have to devote to the things you need to do to be able to move past that into the forward. You'll be fine. You'll be just fine.
Well, or you can use that. What I appreciate about what you do is, you've used something that, a lot of people would take as the end of a career, the end of it all, and turn that into something that's beneficial for a lot of your colleagues, like I said, who have never even heard of anything like this, don't even know that this kind of thing is possible. Right. That, any kid in first year of business school would say, well, sure. In fact, I can tell you about, duty and about all the legal boundaries and the corporate veil and all that kind of stuff. Right. That's how you end up spending time. So, you're uniquely qualified, Roy. So, well, I can't think of any better message. And that really is the message with what we're trying to communicate is, it's a dental practice, and no matter what, at the end of the day, you're still a dentist. And even if that, suffers, you can still get that back, but you've got you're still a dentist no matter what. So, if this particular practice struggles because of a situation that impacted the world, not just, your little town in West Virginia, you learn from that. And if you love the profession, you can start back up tomorrow. There's just a lot of, again, the legal parts of that. But no, that's a great message. That's a good way to look at it. Yeah, not many people have been knocked down in their profession like you. So I appreciate that, you sharing that perspective.
You're welcome.
So practice owners, with that, we're going to draw this one to a close. We went a little over. I think that's okay. There's one guy in dentistry with this story, and Roy, I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. Well, I've heard it before, and and I've heard the full version. Let me ask you this. I might ask where you're going to be speaking next, or, where can we see you?
Well, that's a great question.
Yeah, you are. You're on a schedule again.
Well, as far as speaking virtually, as you know, I do a lot of that. As far as next big events, I do the American Association of Dental Office Managers. That's in Orlando in September. I'm doing the Boston, the Yankee. In January, I'll be at the Texas meeting. I love speaking, love being able to share the story. If anybody has a study club or a group they'd like for me to come to, love to be able to share my story. Love it. Not because I'm proud of it, because I want to be the last one who goes. So if you've heard of this podcast and see me someplace, just stop me and say, "Hey, I saw you with Steve Parker," and I'd love that.
Awesome. So how could somebody get in touch with you if they wanted, wanted to say, "Hey, you live in West Virginia, so you're traveling everywhere." Except for Lexington. How far is Lexington, Kentucky from you?
Actually, Lexington is about 2.5 hours north.
That's what I was thinking.
I was incarcerated in Manchester.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, you lived in Kentucky for a while.
I did. I was in a gated community there for a while.
Yeah, yeah. So how would somebody get in touch with you if they wanted to just chat further, clarify things, or maybe, have you speak at a study club?
Yeah, my email address is probably the email's best. It's ROY _SHELBURNE @hotmail.com. Just my name with an underscore at Hotmail.
All right. And I'll make sure we put that in the show notes here so somebody can just click it and get an email to you. And again, I appreciate you coming on. It looks really sunny there in Virginia.
It's raining right now. That was my yard 2 days ago.
Your virtual background. I love that. So I have people ask me all the time, "Oh, that's a neat background you got." Well, it's not a background. It's my office. This is, I've come in every day. I'm a creature of habit. Mine for weeks, months, probably getting close. We're the only car in the parking lot. I'm the only guy in a 24-unit building. But I still have to do it. So,
creature of habit.
And if I'm 58, and when you get to that age, my wife, I tell her I've earned the privilege of being crotchety and grumpy sometimes, and this is the way I want to do it.
I'm well beyond you.
Well, so you've earned it.
Thanks.
Well, Roy, I appreciate you coming on. Dr. Roy Shelburne, practice owners. Thank you for watching, listening, and if you'd like to reach out, we'll put Dr. Shelburne's email address below. And until next time, coming back stronger, tune in. We have about 60 episodes so far, and hope it's given you the tactics and hands-on and the tools that help you just get your practice reopened and back. So with that, practice owners, see you next time. Roy, see you on the road somewhere. Bye.